We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Good day. Today on Veritas Vox, we have a very special guest, Voddie Baucham. Voddie has been a dear friend of the Detweilers and of Veritas for many years, maybe as many as 20. I don't even remember anymore. Welcome, Voddie. Tell us from where you are making your appearance.
Yeah, I'm in Lusaka, Zambia, the capital city here in Zambia. We've been here for the last 7 years serving with the Reformed Baptist Churches of Zambia to help start the African Christian University. So I'm serving as the dean of the School of Divinity here.
That is wonderful. Well, since you've given a little bit of personal background, let's go back further. Tell us about your family, your background, and how you came to Christ.
Yeah, well, I was raised by a single teenage Buddhist mother in Los Angeles, California. And I never heard the gospel till my first year in university. And it was there that I really came face to face with the person and work of Christ, and had a gentleman, come and share Christ with me. He spent a couple of weeks really answering questions that I had, which was really interesting because I didn't have much.
This was at Rice?
To draw on. Actually, this was before that. This was in New Mexico, at New Mexico State University.
Oh, okay.
Which is a whole nother story.
I never knew that story.
No, I was headed to the Air Force Academy. I had made a commitment to go to the Air Force Academy. And then my uncle, who had served 22 years in the Marine Corps, talked me out of that. And anyway, by that time, it was really late in the game. I had visited New Mexico State because of one particular strength coach who was there. Ended up just saying, okay, fine, I'll go there. And I went and spent
you haven't said this yet,
there.
so I want to make sure that everybody listening knows that you played football in college. So when you say strength coach, you mean because of your football?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I decided to go there, really just to spend a year there, because it was too late for some of the other schools that I was interested in. And interestingly enough, that strength coach was no longer there. And that's where I ended up hearing the gospel. I hear the gospel, I come to faith, and then a semester later, I'm gone. I'm off to Rice University. So it was this jaunt, over to Las Cruces, New Mexico, really so that I could hear the gospel. And so that's where I came to faith. That's where my faith journey started. I started preaching about a year and a half after that, which was, a very interesting time for me. But I got married my sophomore year, the summer between my sophomore and junior year. I married Bridget, and 10 months later, our first child was born. And here we are, nearly 33 years later, and 9 children later, and still going strong. So
something else I remember about you from your first visit to Lancaster, where we met in person, we had talked before that, was that you are very much a foodie. You love finding great restaurants.
Yes.
Is that still an interest?
It really is. And really, it's not just the finding restaurants. And I love to cook. That's really a passion of mine. And, I do love a great restaurant, but, I'll go to a great restaurant and then I'll spend the next month or so trying to recreate the great meal that I had.
That's great.
I am very much a foodie. Yeah.
What took you to Zambia, to Africa?
Really, it was this opportunity with the African Christian University. The Reformed Baptist Churches of Zambia were working toward starting a classical Christian liberal arts biblical worldview university. And, a very unique opportunity. And it was something that I was just perfectly suited for. And I had been coming to Zambia for about 8 years. Almost every year for about 8 years. In love with the place. I remember the first time I came, I went home and Bridget asked me how it went. And I said, I think I might want to be buried there. So when this opportunity arose, it just became obvious. And we made a family trip in 2014 in August. And during that trip, Bridget looked at me and said, "You need to be here." We
Wow.
went back. Yeah, we went back, put it before our elders at our church in Houston, and they were not surprised at all. They knew that, for 8 years I had been, thinking about this. And so our elders said, "Yeah, we agree," And so the following August, we were on the ground in Lusaka. So within 1 year of that last visit, Bridget and I and our 7 youngest children were here on the ground, and that was 7 years ago, August.
That's incredible. It caught me by surprise when I heard about it. I think you'd probably been there a couple of years before I even realized you were gone from Houston. Interesting. You wrote a book, I don't know the year it came out, called Fault Lines. Many people listening will almost certainly know about it. I'm sure many will have read it. What prompted you to write the book?
Yeah, that came out in 2021, came out last year.
It is that new. I was thinking about
yeah,
it really was
no,
timely. Well, I think I know what prompted you, but you tell us.
yeah. These are things that I've been thinking about and speaking about for a long time, but really with the death of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, and really the explosion of the critical social justice movement, and especially among and within evangelical circles, it was sort of this perfect storm that just led me to feel like I needed to do something. I needed to say something, and I needed to write something. And it was difficult to find a publisher even willing to publish that book.
Is that right?
Oh yeah. I mean, very few Christian publishers. In fact, I'm not aware of a single major Christian publisher that has published an anti-social justice book,
Okay.
other than Salem. And Salem's not a major Christian publisher.
Right.
Salem's a rather new kid on the block. They're an imprint of Regnery. And Salem has published several critical social justice, anti-woke, if you will, anti-CRT kind of books. But I don't think any of the major Christian publishers have published a single anti-social justice book. Not that I'm aware of. If they have, then I've just missed it. And nobody wanted to touch mine either.
Talk to us about the premise in the book and the way that you want to cause people to think about these things.
Yeah, I'm arguing that the critical social justice movement is rooted in a worldview that is alien to biblical Christianity. It's antithetical to biblical Christianity, and it's antagonistic to biblical Christianity. And that this alien worldview is in fact a religion of sorts. It is cultic in its nature, and that we need to stand against it. Ultimately, I come back to 2 Corinthians 10 and argue that we need to follow Paul's admonition to take every thought captive, right? But also to destroy arguments and lofty opinions raised against the knowledge of God, that we need to have that twofold perspective and approach to this particular issue, that we need to be exposing these things and destroying these things, and that we need to be thinking biblically about issues of justice and culture and so on and so forth. So in a lot of ways, I'm doing what I've done for a long time. I'm just focusing on this contemporary issue that I believe is a poison pill for the church.
Yeah, I've seen some churches really swallow the pill, and it did produce the effect of a poison. It was really something, and divisive and problematic. So here I am.
And it's really divisive and problematic because, it sounds, it's just like Satan, right? He's masquerading as an angel of light. Justice, what Christian's not for justice, right?
Right.
And then we hear social justice, and we hear racial justice, and anti-racism. Well, I mean, I'm not pro-racism, so certainly, anti-racism sounds good, but all of these ideas, are really cloaked, and they're masquerading as angels of light. And when you sort of pull back the veil, you see that these things don't mean what they sound like they mean, and that they are actually enemies of Christ.
Well, I want to give you two questions related to that. The first one, I'll give them both to you at the same time because you might want to put them together in how you answer. The first one is, our audience is generally the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. The little town I grew up in had no blacks living in it. I didn't grow up around blacks, didn't have black friends in the neighborhood. The high school I went to had no blacks graduate from it. In retrospect, I think there were some racists that caused that to be the case. It's not the case anymore, but I didn't grow up in a racist family. I didn't grow up thinking racist thoughts, but I get pigeonholed. And yet I believe what you say. I want to say what you said, but I can't. What's going on there? What do we do about it?
Yeah, that was another real motivator for me in writing this book. I have so many friends, brothers, and sisters in ministry who will say to me almost exactly what you said, right? They'll say, I've got issues, I've got questions, but I can't say that, or I can't address that, or the minute that I address that, there are assumptions made, there are accusations made. And so because of that, a lot of these things weren't really being dealt with. They weren't really being discussed. And so I sort of felt an obligation to say things that others in a very real way couldn't say, in order to move this conversation further. And it's ironic. Everybody's talking about we need to have a conversation about race, but then they say that white people need to sit down, shut up, and elevate black voices, right? So how are we having a conversation if white people have to sit down, shut up, elevate black voices, and be called racist, right? If and when they say anything. So really, that was part of my motivation for writing in this book and for putting this book out there, is to force the conversation. And it's really ironic because everybody, a lot of the people out there are talking about, we need to have the conversation. We need to have the conversation. They don't want a conversation. They want a monologue. And the minute anybody pushes back, then all of a sudden things get shut down. So, those were kind of motivating factors for me. So I identify with, that circumstance that you shared, because I've seen it so many times, and I believe we've got to get beyond it. I also believe that issue really reminded us that we weren't as unified as we thought we were. Because if you can't say certain things to me for fear of being shut down, then we don't have the relationship that we were pretending to have.
Very, very good point. Very good point. So the book really addresses this problem of woke, CRT, monologue approach to where we are in a way that's very unfortunate. I'm not interested in a political conversation here, although to the extent that it needs to be, so be it. I'm far more interested in a biblical conversation.
Yeah.
What is the status of racism in America? What do you think? Tell me what you do believe is for real.
Yeah.
And then what should we do? Let's have a biblical approach to real solutions rather than just worrying about the fight there.
Yeah,
I love the idea of ignoring an irrational voice while
yeah,
doing rational things.
yeah, absolutely. You know, what's ironic about this whole anti-racist movement is that it moves us away from real answers to real problems. Racism is a real problem. Racism is real, right? But what the critical social justice movement and the anti-racist movement says is that racism is not a matter of the individual heart. Racism is a matter of structures and systems that create inequities. So when the anti-racist movement talks about racism, they're talking about systems and structures, not individuals and not the human heart. The great irony, of course, is that for us as Christians, we know that the answer, that racism is real. We know that, right?
Yes.
But we also know that the answer to racism is a real answer. It's the person and work of Christ applied to the individual human heart. It is calling sin, sin, and calling sinners to repent. But in the anti-racist movement, you have, and this is a direct quote, racism without racists. So what they're doing is they're moving away from the real problem. Here's the other problem. The other problem is that America is one of the least racist multi-ethnic countries in the world. Period. Full
right?
stop.
Yeah.
Yes, America is one of the least racist multi-ethnic countries in the world. I mean, if you want to see real racism, you need to spend some time in some Asian countries,
Yeah.
and hear how some Asian groups think about other Asian groups, for example. Even where I am, on the African continent, you have that same issue here. One of the things I write about in the book is how, I have a friend here. He was born and raised here in Zambia, but his parents are from India. His parents immigrated from India. He was born and raised here. He's not considered a Zambian because he's not Black. Like, that's the reality on the ground here, right? Is yet you don't really consider people Zambian unless they are Black. Well, that's racist.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
But in America, anyone can come and be in America. I love watching the Olympics, right? And one of the things I love about the Olympics is how you watch whatever sports you want to watch, and America has people who look like the people from every other country in the Olympics, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And all these other
you're absolutely right.
All these other countries, everybody looks exactly the same. And then here's America, or someplace like, Great Britain, United Kingdom or whatever. And there's very few places in the world that have the kind of melting pot that exists in the United States, and the kind of camaraderie that exists, and the kind of history that we have of actually confronting and dealing with racism. People talk about racism today in America, like there was no Civil War,
right.
and like there were no 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, right?
Yeah.
Like there was no Civil Rights Act, like there was no Voting Rights Act. I mean, we changed our Constitution. Here's another thing, right? So the US Constitution came with 10 amendments. Okay?
Right.
So here we are with our original Constitution, and we have 10 amendments. We end slavery within the lifetime of people who founded America. And we're talking about people, who were in their 70s.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I do.
We're talking about, and so we end slavery, and it's the 13th Amendment, which means there were only 2 other times in the history of America that the Constitution had been amended. Yeah. And the 3rd time we amended was to end slavery. Yeah. And yet we talk like, all America's ever been, all America's ever done, is rooted and grounded in this. No, No, absolutely not. You know, when you look at, you know, the founding of the country, and when you look at the establishment of, you know, our republic and our Constitution, and you look at that relatively short period of history, the other thing is is that, you know, racism and slavery existed everywhere in the world. Only in the West, only in the Christian West, for the first time, do you have a moral argument against slavery being made. And the West had to use its power in order to force the rest of the world to end slavery.
Yeah,
and one more thing. There are more slaves in the world today than there were at the height of American slavery.
wow. You know, we live, as they say, in interesting times. And of course, that's an understatement. I am so glad to hear your voice. We could go on for a long time on this, but I want to cover some other things. So I'm sorry, I got you wound up. You got me
Yeah,
wound
man, you
up.
got me going. You got me going.
The audience probably wound up, but we're going to move on.
Yeah.
You have also, it's been a very passionately communicated idea. You've championed that people need to leave the public or government schools. Tell us why.
Yeah, I think for a number of reasons. I think one thing is sphere sovereignty, right? That God gives us these three spheres, these three jurisdictions. He gives us the family and the church and the state. Education was never put under the jurisdiction of the state. Talking about the U.S. Constitution, you don't find education in the U.S. Constitution. You don't have mandatory government education until the very late 1800s. By 1900, still 2/3 of all students were being educated at home or at church. The American educational system was founded by radical Unitarians who had as one of their primary goals what they called the elimination of religious superstition. They wanted to get education out of the hands of the church and the family, and they wanted to inculcate students in secular humanism. Also, it has Marxist roots. Public education, government education, that's the 10th pillar, right, in the Communist Manifesto.
Yep.
So this is not what we're called to. People talk about reforming government education. To reform something means to take it back to its original intended purpose. And the original intended purpose of mandatory government education in the United States is anti-Christian. And now our schools are anti-Christian by federal mandate, right? It is against the law for our schools, for government schools in the United States, to be pro-Christ. That's illegal. So, you know, we need to recognize that education is discipleship. Between kindergarten and 12th grade, a student spends 14,000 instructional hours in school. 14,000 instructional hours. And, you know, the Bible tells us that a pupil is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. And in the government education system, the teacher is the curriculum. And that curriculum is anti-Christian by federal mandate.
I said this before, and it might have even been in the context of another episode of Veritas Vox's podcast, but I've Googled the top 10 events in history, and I have not found a single list. I think I went 8 or 10 pages deep and didn't find a single list that included the birth of Christ, the incarnation, the resurrection, whatever you want to say of the events surrounding Christ coming to earth, God in becoming man. Not one of them had that on there. And I don't care how radical an atheist you are, no one can deny the significance of Jesus Christ in history.
Right.
And yet we're so afraid of it as secular people that we won't even put it on the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with you. It matters who writes history. It matters the perspective of the teacher. and it is, and I was there. I didn't understand that education is not simply something to which you add flavor to.
Mm.
It is necessarily born out of some form of religious philosophy, even if that is atheism or agnosticism. It can't be morally neutral and have
No,
you
it
add the
can't.
flavor.
No, it really can't be, and it never has been, and it never will be. So we need to recognize that we have a duty, a responsibility, and an obligation to our children.
I know you to
we're
be a bit entrepreneurial. Do you have a sense of trajectory of how people like me and our opportunity to provide some level of influence at Veritas and others, how we help get that message into the hands of Christian parents?
Boy, it's tough, because
It
the
is.
overwhelming majority of Christian parents send their children to government schools. We just have to not grow weary in doing well. We have to continue to contend for this. We have to continue to, speak the truth in love. We have to continue to try to open people's eyes, educate them. And I think COVID was really helpful in that regard, because a lot of people had to bring their kids home, right?
Yes,
And several things happened as a result of that.
they
Number
sure
one,
did.
a lot of Christians saw their children for the first time in a long time. And when I say saw them, I mean they recognized their children's character and worldview, and they recognized it as something foreign, because their kids just go off to school every day. They have no idea what's happening at school every day. Now the kid is at home, and you're forced to, work with them and be with them in ways that you haven't. And a lot of parents just recognized, I don't know who this child is, right? I don't know what this worldview is. The second thing that happened is a lot of people got to see the work that their children were doing and recognized that there wasn't much there, right?
Yeah.
And then a third thing is a lot of people got to experience the great challenge, but the great benefit of discipling their children like that, And so I think, all of these things together, I've talked to a number of people who've decided not to go back,
Yeah.
and who've decided to do things differently. And that's been very encouraging.
Yeah, I hope it sticks. As you know, we humans have short memories.
Yes.
And we need to be diligent. You're absolutely right. We should not tire in doing what we know we need to do. Thanks. One last question. What appeals to you about classical Christian education? How is it that what was it that caused you to be interested?
Wow. We started homeschooling. Our oldest two children went to Christian school, a traditional Christian school, and my wife was a school teacher. She taught in the public school, so that was never an option for us because we knew what was there, right? By the way, public school teachers are twice as likely as the rest of the population to have their children in private school.
Really?
Yes. Twice as likely.
I've
Yes.
never heard that.
Yeah. It says a lot when you're willing to pay money not to use your own product for free, right? And so we ended up, deciding to homeschool, and almost immediately I had this feeling that a lot of new homeschoolers have. I just realized that, I had more degrees than a thermometer, but I was not well educated.
Okay.
I was well schooled,
Yeah,
but not well educated. And the things that, the children were learning and the things that we were teaching our children. And then we started thinking more about philosophy of education. And that's when, the investigation sort of opened up to classical education. And it was like a light went on, there's a reason that classical education has has stood the test of time, right? There's a reason that idea of, holding on to and preserving highest and best, and then passing that on to the next generation, to give them a foundation upon which they can build. There's a reason that has stood the test of time. There's a reason that the classics are understood to be classics. And so, all of that just sort of led us through this process where, bit by bit, we moved into the world of classical education. And, now again, African Christian University is a classical university. We're here in the heart of sub-Saharan Africa, but all of our students take Latin their whole freshman year. So, I mean, we're full on classical liberal arts university, and excited about the fruit.
Yeah, that is wonderful. Yeah, it was, we first got started in classical education. It was 1992. I did a fair amount of public speaking, talking about what could be from this education. Now, 30 years later, I look back and I see the product and I see the results. And boy, I was right. And it is important.
Amen.
Very good.
Amen.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're most welcome. It's been my pleasure. Heart.
I hope the next time you're in Lancaster, I know you were there and you didn't tell me, because I had a guy working for me that was at your talk at a church there. And I know that you get a lot of things, but next time you're there, you come to Lancaster, we'll get out the apps that you use, find the restaurant you want to go to, and I'm buying.
All right, man. It sounds good. And there's some good places around there.
Yeah, there are. We can go to Philadelphia too, which is even better.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. We've had Voddie Baucham with us today. He has a lot to say, and I hope you're listening. Thank you so much.